What's a bad thing? Our always being together. He says you ought to have other friends, boys your own age. Well, he's right. Well, I don't want any other friend. Hush, buddy, now hush. You've been real good to me. I don't know what I'd do without you. Just become an old crab. But I want to see you happy, buddy. Strong, able to go out in the world, and you're never going until you come to terms with people like Odd Henderson and turn them into friends. Him? He's the last friend in the world I want. Please, buddy, invite that boy here for Thanksgiving dinner. Though the pair of us occasionally quibbled, we never quarreled. At first, I was unable to believe she meant her request as something more than a sample of poor taste humor. But then, seeing that she was serious, I realized with bewilderment that we were edging toward a falling out. I thought you were my friend. Well, I am, buddy, truly. Well, if you were, you couldn't think up a thing like that. Odd Henderson hates me. He's my enemy. Well, he can't hate you. He doesn't know you. Well, I hate him. Well, because you don't know him. That's all I ask. The chance for you to know each other a little. Then I think the trouble will stop. And maybe you're right, buddy. Maybe you boys won't ever be friends. But I doubt that he'd pick on you anymore. Well, you don't understand. You never hated anybody. No, I never have. We're allotted just so much time on earth, and I wouldn't want the Lord to see me wasting mine in any such manner. Well, I won't do it. He'd think I was crazy, and I would be. The rain had let up, leaving a silence that lengthened miserably. My friend's clear eyes contemplated me as though I were a rook card she was deciding how to play. She maneuvered a salt-pepper lock of hair off her forehead and sighed. Well, then I will. Tomorrow, she said, I'll put on my hat and pay a call on Molly Henderson. This statement certified her determination, for I'd never known Miss Sook to plan a call on anyone, not only because she was entirely without social talent, but also because she was too modest to presume a welcome. I don't suppose there will be much Thanksgiving in their house. Probably Molly would be very pleased to have Odd sit down with us. Oh, I know Uncle B would never permit it, but the nice thing to do is invite them all. My laughter woke Queenie. After a surprised instant, my friend laughed too. Her cheeks pinked and a light flared in her eyes. Rising, she hugged me and said, "Oh, buddy, I knew you'd forgive me and recognize there was some sense to my notion." Well, she was mistaken. My merriment had other origins. Two. One was the picture of Uncle B carving a turkey for all those cantankerous Hendersons. The second was, it had occurred to me that I had no cause for alarm. Miss Sook might extend the invitation, and Odd's mother might accept it in his behalf, but Odd wouldn't show up in a million years. He would be too proud. For instance, throughout the Depression years, our school distributed free milk and sandwiches to all children whose families were too poor to provide them with a lunchbox. But Odd, emaciated as he was, refused to have anything to do with these handouts. He'd wander off by himself and devour a pocketful of peanuts or gnaw a large raw turnip. This kind of pride was characteristic of the Henderson breed. They might steal, gouge the gold out of a dead man's teeth, but they would never accept a gift offered openly, for anything smacking of charity was offensive to them. Odd was sure to figure Miss Sook's invitation as a charitable gesture, or see it, and not incorrectly, as a blackmailing stunt meant to make him ease up on me. I went to bed that night with a light heart, for I was certain my Thanksgiving would not be marred by the presence of such an unsuitable visitor. The next morning I had a bad cold. which was pleasant. It meant no school. It also meant I could have a fire in my room and cream of tomato soup and hours alone with Mr. Micawber and David Copperfield. These are characters from novels he loves to read. The happiest of stay-abeds. It was drizzling again, but true to her promise, my friend fetched her hat, a straw cartwheel decorated with weather-faded velvet roses, and set out for the Henderson home. "I won't be but a minute," she said. In fact, she was gone the better part of 2 hours. I couldn't imagine Miss Zook sustaining so long a conversation except with me or herself. She talked to herself often, a habit of sane persons of a solitary nature. And when she returned, she did seem drained. Still wearing her hat and an old loose raincoat, she slipped a thermometer in my mouth and then sat at the foot of the bed. "I like her," she said firmly. "I always have liked Molly Henderson. She does all she can, and the house was clean as Bob Spencer's fingernails." Bob Spencer being a Baptist minister famed for his hygienic gleam. But bitter cold, with a tin roof and the wind right in the room and not a scrap of fire in the fireplace. She offered me refreshment, and I surely would have welcomed a cup of coffee, but I said no, because I don't expect there was any coffee on the premises, or sugar. It made me feel ashamed, Buddy. It hurts me all the way down to see somebody struggling like Molly, never able to see a clear day. I don't say people should have everything they want, though come to think of it, I don't see what's wrong with that either. You ought to have a bike to ride, and why shouldn't Queenie have a beef bone every day? Yes, it's come to me. Now I understand. We really all of us ought to have everything we want. I'll bet you a dime that's what the Lord intends. And when all around us we see people who can't satisfy the plainest needs, I feel ashamed. Oh, not of myself, because who am I, an old nobody who never owned a mite? If I hadn't had a family to pay my way, I'd have starved or been sent to the county home. The shame I feel is for all of us who have anything extra when other people have nothing. I mentioned to Molly how we had more quilts here than we could ever use. There's a trunk of scrap quilts in the attic, the ones I made when I was a girl and couldn't go outdoors much. But she cut me off, said the Hendersons were doing just fine, thank you. And the only thing they wanted was Dad to be set free and sent home to his people. Miss Zook, she told me, Dad is a good husband, no matter what else he might be. Meanwhile, she has her children to care for. And Buddy, you must be wrong about her boy Odd, at least partially. Molly says he's a great help to her and a great comfort, never complains, regardless of how many chores she gives him. Says he can sing good as you hear on the radio, and when the younger children start raising a ruckus, he can quiet them down by singing to them. Bless us, she lamented, retrieving the thermometer. All we can do for people like Molly is respect them and remember them in our prayers. The thermometer had kept me silent, and now I demanded, "But what about the invitation?" "Sometimes," she said, scowling at the scarlet thread in the glass. "I think these eyes are giving out. At my age, a body starts to look around very closely, so you'll remember how cobwebs really looked. But to answer your question, Molly was happy to hear you thought enough of Odd to ask him over for Thanksgiving. And," she continued, ignoring my groan, "she said she was sure he'd be tickled to come. Your temperature is just over the 100 mark. I guess you can count on staying home tomorrow. That ought to bring smiles. Let me see you smile, Buddy."